Okay.
Hello, my name is Fritz Ko, and welcome back to my YouTube channel show, Factual Conspiracy. Tonight's guest is Ray Dennis Davis, and we have an interesting topic prepared for you guys. Topic for conversation is India. Welcome to the show, Ray. Um, it's good to have you back. We had attempted a show in the past, and unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties on my end, that show was lost. I do want to apologize to you and thank you for returning.
Not a problem. It's always good to be here. And
What?
thank you for having me on your show.
Oh man, dude, I really do appreciate your time. All
Very
right.
cool.
So you have an extensive background in India, in the culture, in ancient traditions, and ancient folklore, and different stuff like Hamanas and the ancient Sanskrits, and different lores and whatnot. And we had talked previously in the past. You said a lot of this started from your own personal research, and I'll just let you take over from there a little bit, where you found out a lot of the information that you have.
Hmm. Well, when I was a kid, my father, he used to take me to the local library. And, yeah, I used to take out books on pretty much everything and anything. I would read everything from like encyclopedias to Judy Blume to, astronomy. It really didn't matter. But then as time went on, I started to get into other, more esoteric stuff. I used to divide my reading between, I would read like, a light book and then, something a little bit heavier. I'd have a book on physics, and, I'd have the esoteric stuff. And after that, those were subjects, let's start with like ghosts, Bigfoot, that type of thing. But I got a couple of like really good books when I was a kid, and the one that really sticks out in my mind was called something to the effect Mysteries of Forgotten Worlds, I think it was. And I think that was by Charles Berlitz, who did the Bermuda Triangle. So I remember I read his Bermuda Triangle first and being very impressed with that. But the Mysteries of, Forgotten Past or whatever that book was, I really like that because in there he kind of talks about a new theory, a new idea, which was something, I had never really thought of. And I think the majority of people even now wouldn't think of is that, if you went back to the beginning of civilization as we know it, which is roughly 10 to 15,000 years as far as, we've been able to determine from Mesopotamia to Göbekli Tepe, that's roughly a pretty, conservative estimate. But that's one that I think most people agree on, 10,000 to 15,000 years. Well, if that's the case, going back to Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon and all that, that's like 100,000 years. And in his book, by the end of the book, he kind of theorizes and puts forth his theory that, if it took us 10,000 years to go from Mesopotamia, Göbekli Tepe, all the way till now, and the atom bomb, that's plenty of time for about three, maybe even four civilizations to have come up, developed an atom bomb or something like that, exploded, destroyed themselves, and the rest, there'd be tens, maybe 20, 30,000 years in between for stuff to erode, metal, as we know it, all the iron and everything. That kind of erodes after about 500 to definitely 1,000 years. So all the skyscrapers and things like that we see today, if you gave people like even 3,000 years, the majority, 90% of it would be gone. So it was a mind blowing hypothesis for me as a kid, and thinking like, wow, like, I could see that, they have all these oops artifacts, like out of place artifacts that show up, and they don't seem to make much sense, but yet they're there, like they'll find a cog, someplace, like totally out of whack that should not be there, and it's within the strata of the earth that where it just should not be, and it's a cog. It looks like a screw. It has the makings of a screw, but yet there's no machine for it to fit in, and it should be a machine for it to fit in, but yet it's there. Um, but so, going back to that, yeah, that's how I got into that. And then right around the same time, I got a little bit older. I was a teenager, and I started to read about linguistics and things like that. And there's always kind of been an argument with India and Arabic and Indian mathematics, like which kind of came first. The majority of the algebra and stuff that we use tends to come from algebra from Arabia, but basically Arabia is just not that far from the Indus Valley and into India, and so India itself never really kind of gets the credit for mathematics as well as linguistics, as the majority of the linguistics we tend to, have come from Sumeria, again, Mesopotamia. So it's got kind of like a very Eurocentric idea of like everything came from Mesopotamia. Like there's probably diffusion that comes from India and the Indus Valley over to Arabia, which is the Middle East.
I mean, it is a known fact that before Roman times and Greek times, that Middle Eastern cultures possessed a higher knowledge of medicine than Europeans, especially during the Dark Ages.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm thinking by that time, you have Alexander the Great. He had already come and rolled through and had made it to India, but you really didn't have anyone else, of any real consequence that really traveled that route until maybe, Marco Polo's time after the Dark Ages, I guess. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's amazing. Like you have the Black Plague and all that going on in Europe and everything. Decimates three-quarters or whatever of people that were there. But yet in India they had Ayurvedic, which is natural healing. Now, of course, they're very lucky in that they have places and things like persimmon, I think turmeric is called. They use that in the majority, it's like a curry type. So they were kind of blessed with some natural ingredients that really kind of only occur there. But it is pretty amazing that, they had this natural healing art like way back then, along with yoga and some of the other things. And it's very interesting now that, India as a country is finally starting to be recognized or noticed universally. I just think that's very interesting. And as a country, it's probably the last real mysterious country that people don't know all that much about, as it is. I mean, it used to be maybe China, but China has broken down and opened up a lot of its doors to Western culture. And I think only now people are starting to pick up on, India and the Indian culture as we see it now.
And I think maybe you should probably explain a little bit of their class structure there in India too, that has existed for thousands of years, as far as my knowledge is.
Yeah, yeah. In India, they have what's called a caste system, which is like basically the way it's broken down is that whatever you're born into, that's what you are. Like, in America, most of the other countries, you're able to rise up out of your caste system, i.e., like if you work hard enough, you can make something of yourself. You can start a business if you want, for the most part. You can get a job. You can go to university. In India, and I'm generalizing. I'm not saying that this is always the case, but from what I've read and seen, it is. The caste systems, if you're born poor, you're pretty much poor. You're not going to get a shot. You would have to like win an actual literal lottery to leave the country, to pursue other options. I mean, and that's really what holds India back as far, in my mind, as being a world power. It's just amazing. Like you read that and you're just like, oh, it's such a shame because they have these millions of people there, all of them extremely smart, just about, and just I'm always just really kind of flabbergasted that they're not more of a world power.
I would
Very
totally agree.
surprising.
And I would also like to say not just the medicine, but their capability for literature and storing their literature that they have preserved for just like their caste system for thousands of years, and it's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, exactly. And the other thing that really makes India very divisive, if probably not the most divisive country, is its diversity of religions. If you look at India, every major religion is in India. Just about. Like they have Catholic, they have, I'm sorry, Christian Catholic, um, Jewish, they have, Muslim. There's a large Muslim percentage there, as well as Hindu, as well as Buddhist. And they just, as of right now, they're not able to make that work to their advantage. Instead, it seems to be like a major dividing point where, like, I guess because they've lived in that caste system so long, it has somehow spread into the cultural idea of the religions themselves. So, like, Hindus don't mix with, Buddhists. And actually, I think you would think that the Muslim and the Catholics would battle with each other over there, but it isn't. From what everything I've read, it seems to be mostly Hindu and Muslims battling it out with one another there. They also have what are called Sikhs, which is, a whole nother, the Bobs. The Bobism is also there. So you've got like about seven, maybe eight major religions that we know of all in one spot. Nobody's working together as a team, so there's no cohesive unity at all. Um, Now, when you get into literature, like you were saying, go back to that, you could literally be an expert on Indian literature and nothing else because it's so vast. And there's Indian literature that, is within the culture, but you could also be an expert on religious literature because that is just, amazing. They have knowledge of cosmology, Indian cosmology that starts like at like Planck time, where there's like nothing, uh, right after the Big Bang, all the way up. They literally have it like planned out. I mean, a person could really be an expert just on Indian religious literature, Hindu.
Nice. And one thing that was really interesting to me when we're talking about literature when it comes to them is that they have touched on lots of different interesting aspects that I touch on in my show throughout, their history when they talk about things that have happened in the past. One thing in particular, uh, they comment on flying aircraft at one period in time. And these vehicles are called Hamanas, I believe. I may be
Yeah,
pronouncing them incorrectly.
Brahmanas. And it's basically, I think that story is like a battle between two gods. I don't remember if it's Krishna or whoever, but they have a battle, and it just basically sounds very much like, a battle between airplanes or stealth fighters. And, they give descriptions, and I find this interesting too, that I think the descriptions, if I remember correctly, talk about a mercury driven engine, which is interesting now because when I hear about, some of the modern UFO things, the triangular ones, uh, for whatever reason, I think some of the descriptions of them have a mercury driven engine in them as well.
And it's very
Uh,
interesting that you bring that up because the Nazi scientist or German scientist that created the first jet propulsion engine, they asked him at one point in time, someone did, a reporter or whatnot, asked him where he got the idea to create the engine. And he said,
right.
from reading ancient Indian texts. And as it's portrayed in the Indiana Jones movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Nazis were kind of engaging in that type of activity. They were scouring Africa and all over the place. There's stories of them being in Antarctica. And so it makes you wonder what kind of knowledge, the Nazis did possess at the end before, Germany was pretty much destroyed and their museums looted by Russians and Americans and everyone else. You know what I mean? A lot of
Right.
knowledge has
Well,
probably
that
fell through the cracks
all
and
that stuff is
disappeared forever
right.
that they had recollected.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff is all kind of connected, like you were saying. Yeah, I have no doubt that they definitely, at the very least, went to India. They had people sent there. They wanted to prove that there was a connection between again, the linguistic style of writing and, their, Germanic, Teutonic, style of writing. They really wanted to shy away from any idea that writing as we know it came from the Middle East. At the same time, they were sending people, a group of people to Norway or someplace as well, and we're trying to find the base of the Germanic language, a Teutonic language that came from there. As they really wanted to prove that there was a Nazi supergroup that they came from,
It,
Supermen.
it's almost
Uh,
hard to believe too, because all the like you're saying, all the places they were also in Tibet. I mean,
right.
all the ancient, like quote unquote, cradle birthplaces of ancient civilizations, they pretty much touched and explored. And it's really weird too that after they went to Antarctica and Admiral Byrd launched an expedition to see if there was any Nazis there, that there's a moratorium on that. As far as I know, no one is allowed to go to Antarctica. You can go to the North Pole, but you can't go to Antarctica.
Yeah, right. Like there's that too. Like you have to be a trained scientist in order to go there. You need a special pass, I think. Although it is amazing that they do have like an ATM down there for them to use. I believe it's the only one on
Interesting.
Antarctica. Which is interesting because, well, apparently, like when the scientists are down there, there is a places inside where they have to eat and everything. But that's very interesting too. But yeah, getting back to Germany and what they were doing, I have no doubt. Like we've been told. I'm sure that they were doing other things besides that. Like you were saying, they were definitely interested, like in the Indiana Jones and where they were looking for mystical,
I think that's a
anything. They
cover.
definitely looked
I think that's
for the
definitely a
serial
cover
Levitic.
story, like almost to the fact of like they were just looking for. I'm thinking for ancient knowledge, so they could possess it for themselves. Because one of the first things Hitler did when he crossed over into Austria was he went to the museum and he took the Spear of Destiny.
That's right.
And so I think their main concern was technology, and we can tell that was a fact. I mean, just based upon how German technology always has been. I mean, if you want a good car, you buy a German car. You know what I mean? You buy a BMW, you buy a Mercedes. Um, Long story short, Volkswagen is a pretty decent car too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pretty decently
Yeah.
made automobile. And when the scientist said that he was reading ancient Indian scripts, I just think back to the story that we were talking about of the gods and the aerial battles, and then describe. I'm thinking he was reading some stuff like that, and I've heard other stories also, like not just that one in particular, of texts from India where they said that some kings or princes or something may have had some flying technology. Have you heard anything that fits in with that?
Yeah, I don't have any doubt that, whatever technology they did find there or were able to build, the feeling I kind of get is like it was the end of the war from what I've read about the Glocka, which is the time travel device,
The Nazi bell.
UFO, right, the Nazi one. I have no doubt that they were probably working on that towards the end of the war. I don't think, this is my own personal feeling, I don't think they created it fully yet. Like, I almost get the sense like the Americans or whoever were able to storm in and shut it down.
Well,
And anything
here's
that
what.
was there was like quickly taken out and brought to us,
One thing that
very
the
quickly.
SS did was the SS came in and killed somewhere near 200 scientists that were working on that project before it was either the Russians or us. I believe it was the Russians. They came in there, and they wanted to protect all that information once they realized that Russia and the United States was snatching up scientists and, not to send them to prison. I mean, in Operation Paperclip alone, we brought 2,000 German scientists to America, one of them being Werner von Braun, who was actually, father of NASA, our spaceflight program, NASA. He's the father of that program. He created the V-12 rockets that were used on England by Germany during World War II. And
Right,
it's
and
pretty much the same
and who
racket,
was the
same
other?
for
Who was the other
spaceflight.
guy? There was Von Neumann or something, I think.
Oh man, there's a whole bunch of Vons. You know what I mean? Luther von Vandenberg. No, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of different German scientists, over 2,000 different ones, and there was ones. They were specific in different types of categories in fields that they specialized in. And like for example, von Braun was specialized in rockets, in propulsion systems and things of that nature. And there was other guys that specialized in MK Ultra type things and all kinds of different other this, that, and the other in betweens, etc. On and so forth. But pretty much what it was a lot of different controversial things for the most part. That's why it wasn't something that was expressed to the government or to the public publicly by the government that we were bringing, that many different Nazi scientists, some of them war criminals, here, and paying for their lives and their existences, and funding their further research and their technology developments, but for our benefit.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I'm just about positive, like whatever it was that they were working on, they probably scarfed it right out of there and shut it down, and everything else killed whoever was there. Because this is all like what we're hearing, and I have no doubt, like we hear probably at the most 20% of what happens in any given situation that our government deals in. Probably closer to 10, 9%.
Yeah, an ancient theorist said about 200 years ago, all you got to do is look to figure out who is controlling you in any given society in any given time period is look who you're not allowed to question. And those are the people that are responsible for your slavery.
Right, exactly. Um, yeah, very interesting stuff. But getting back to India and the connection between the Graka and that, I have no doubt that, and you're going to hear this a lot. Like I've been noticing in the news, they've dug up recently. I think in two different spots actually. They were like two rulers. One was in Mexico, and the other ruler was in China. And it was both of them were underground tombs, and wherever the ruler was, he was up on top of something, and there was like a round circular pool of mercury. So and it was these two different places that historically weren't aware of one another, didn't talk to one another allegedly, although there might have been diffusion from China to Mexico, but I don't know if the two were connected in this case. There's definitely, I believe the ancients, they knew the abilities of Mercury and, probably knew that it had some kind of tie-in with time travel or faster than light speed or, I'm not quite sure how it works. Maybe it opens up a wormhole. But basically, I think the idea is that the Mercury spins around in a circle while they have like magnets go around
That's what
Mercury, and somehow or other it makes whatever's the inside of that or around it able to be lighter than air, or travel faster than the speed of light.
That's what I've heard too. That's exactly what I've heard too. Is the theory proposed that there's mercury that spins and somehow magnets are involved in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've actually been in contact with some people on Yahoo News and stuff. That one guy claimed that he worked for one of the air Northrop Grumman or something like that out there, and he was saying very similar that we have at least two, possibly three of those types of machines that we made that were that we made ourselves after reverse engineering crashed UFOs over the years.
Well, it's really
And
interesting that you say that too, because I was always under the premise that a lot of these UFO sightings didn't really happen till after World War II, once these Nazi scientists had been actually brought here to our country. And, people like to talk about the Glocka and lots of different other things, and it's kind of a fact that they had them. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it just means that once we brought all the Nazi scientists here, that we then have UFO technology. Then at that point, and that's why people were seeing them. That's why Roswell happened. You know what I mean? It was probably one of the first ones and was crashed. You know what I mean? The first American built. Uh, type aircraft, if whatever you want to call it, I guess. But another thing before we moved on too far, and I'm sure you'd probably want to come back to what I just said, but when we talk about the Mercury and stuff, I can't help but think about alchemists in the Middle Ages. We've talked about the Middle Ages just briefly here, and made a connection there before. Do you think there's anything involved there a little bit that's been hidden from us? Like they say they're trying to find an elixir of life. I'm not sure if that's 100% true when they were ingesting chemicals. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny you mention that because, yeah, I do think that there is some kind of basis to alchemy. I really do. That, either has been forgotten, or, maybe there's certain groups that still know about it. But if you think about it, all of the elements that we have here on Earth, which is essentially carbon based, and I'm talking, everything from like iron, zinc, all these things that are like the hard, heavy elements to the lighter, elements. All those things come from the stars, basically. Everything that we have on our Earth came from two stars specifically that circled around one another billions of years ago. Billions of years later went supernova. Those two exploded. And because that's the only type of heat that can create those types of elements. It has to be two stars. They have to live to a certain point and explode together. So then it took, billions of years for that, all those elements to shoot out into space while our Earth was forming further out. Eventually, all those elements and pieces, landed on our forming Earth millions of years ago. Then it took millions of years for it to sink into Earth. And then, another million years for it to come up far enough and to form and harden for us to find it, millions of years from that. So you're talking about, basically all these things that these alchemists were mixing together. He had one source that it came from, a star. So is it possible to transmutate one form into another? And in theory, yeah. Do we have the ability to? Do we have the means to? Sometimes yes, other times no. That's not to say that some of these guys knew secret ways to transmutate one element into another. Yeah, I don't have any doubt. And the number one, of course, like you were saying, that they were trying to transmutate was gold. So again, like if you'd have to really think like if our whole banking system, and I hate to jump from one conspiracy idea to another, but a lot of them are kind of connected.
No, that's
Our whole
fine. That's
banking
what we do
system
on this show.
connected to gold. So if everybody had gold, it's like after that it would be worthless if we all had it.
It's very true.
And our dollar's based on it and everything. So, if that got out that, hey, you can just create gold in your kitchen sink, what would happen?
Yeah, really, we'd all be millionaires, but just for a second, it'd be like king for a day, and then gold wouldn't be worth nothing by tomorrow.
Right, exactly. But yeah, getting back to what you were saying about the alchemists and the elements, yeah, I think it's very possible and probable that they were at the very least onto something there. And you're talking about guys like Isaac Newton was an alchemist. I mean, the guy came up with gravity along with other inventions that you read about him on Wikipedia or if you get a book on him. Very probably the most intelligent guy for at least 500 years. The only guy I can think of that rivaled him was Da Vinci, and I would only put Da Vinci first because he was more diverse. But yeah, I mean, all these guys had that ability. So I mean, if you got a guy like Newton working on that with secret knowledge or whatever he has, at his fingertips. Who knows? I'm sure maybe he did know some things, or other people did.
You know what's
There was
so
there's a
what's
couple accounts that have appeared throughout history that nobody really knows who they are. There's the one with like Saint Germain, and then there was another guy around the turn of this past century that he knew all kinds of secrets. He had spoke with the U.S. government. He appeared like around World War II, and then he like disappeared again. Nobody talked to him. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, another thing that is so interesting to me about this whole topic, especially what we're just now discussing, is the fact that, okay, so they knew how to spin mercury, and when you think about stuff like the Baghdad battery, the possibility that ancient Egyptians had lights in pyramids, and they had scrolled pictures on temple walls depicting what looks like light bulbs and wires and electricity. You know what I mean? And so if they had at different periods of time, way before the Middle Ages, that knowledge that you could spin mercury and you could make magnets and spin the magnets and create some kind of propulsion engine out of that, what all did they know? I mean, to possess that knowledge, they were definitely more, if that is the fact, if that is accurate, they would be then more technically advanced, I would be guessing, than we are now, or are gonna be for a while. And it's a different type of system too. Like most of our engines and things are combustion based upon gas. It doesn't seem like they had that type of technology at all. You know what I mean? Like we're something totally different. Our culture, what it's based upon, our societies.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, and when I think of it, when I look at like the Baghdad battery and everything, it's a fairly recent, although it's older than we, they're given credit for, obviously, because it's an oops artifact. But I have no doubt that they had that. If you look at the Egyptian tombs, almost always they never see, uh, they don't ever see torch marks on the ceiling from fires. You have to wonder, all right, how are these guys, digging down there? How are they creating these structures with no light? And they've tried to use the mirror to mirror thing, and eventually the light disperses over time, as we know. So it only went so far, like from, outside sunlight working in the daytime. So after that, you're wondering, okay, where did the illumination to work on this stuff come from? And, the Baghdad battery, I have no doubt. Now, if you go back far farther than that,
You know what
the
scientists
other
will
side,
say? They'll
yeah,
say they use
when you get back
mirrors.
towards the beginning of the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, I don't have any doubt that they had a different. I'll put it this way: I think they were more advanced than us, or at least as advanced, but with a different type of um, science and technology than we have. I think theirs was very earth based, and they had machines that worked off of the earth somehow that we don't quite understand, or we didn't develop it. We developed in a different way,
Yeah, the machine with
Somehow
the
that
magnets and
earth
the
based knowledge
mercury
got
doesn't
lost,
sound like it
and
produces pollution.
occasionally you'll get a guy like Nikola Tesla or somebody like that picked up on, hey, the earth emits sound waves and we can use sound waves to spread electricity. And, he had the tower, Tesla did. And so I think, again, those things are connected. I think, the Egyptians and people before them already had machines or some type of thing that, worked off of that.
Well, you're absolutely right, man. When you talk about Tesla with the Wardenclyffe and J.P. Morgan not backing that project anymore once he realized he was going to provide people with free electricity. And the mercury and the magnets, as long as you didn't have a machine that spit out a little bit of mercury here and there, like our two-stroke engine stroke motors do in the two-stroke motors do when you're out in the lake, then it probably would be a pretty clean source of energy. You know what I mean? As far as no pollutants, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, you look back on that, and I have no doubt that these guys, previous generations and previous peoples had those, similar types of things. And it gets forgotten or it gets buried, or a group of people that have it are no longer around and just got forgotten. And It takes a guy like Tesla or some other genius to rediscover it again. There's also a guy who created the coral capsule down in Florida. And again, like I hate to sound like I'm jumping from one conspiracy thing to another, but I'm not trying to say I I don't think they're connected. I think that science and people rediscover the same things is the point I'm trying to make. And yeah, I think these people knew it back then, and every once in a while you'll have somebody today that rediscovers it. And this guy, I think his name was Edward something. He created the Coral Castle, and he said that he knew how to move blocks the way the ancient Egyptians did, and he did it by himself.
And they still haven't figured out how he's moved those blocks today because he was moving some blocks up to 2,000 pounds with like joke equipment, stuff he should not have been able to be moving.
Right, right, exactly. And you know, when you look at it, like he was a guy. I think he was like 120 pounds or something.
He was not a
So,
massive dude, and he was pretty, he wasn't a young guy either. Not to say he was ancient or anything, but he was not a young guy. He was not extremely physically fit by no means, per se. He was an average gentleman, I'm guessing, in his 50s. And
hey,
yeah, he was able to lift some extremely large and extremely heavy blocks, and people today still cannot figure out and recreate exactly what he did there.
yeah, exactly. And nobody saw him working on it. He was alone. So again, you have to wonder, like, you know, even if you had a pulley system, you know, again, you still need somebody to move the block if you're pulling the pulley, you know.
That's very
Uh,
true. And at the same time, each time you hook up another pulley, in all fairness and due respects to pulleys, each time you do hook up another pulley, it does take off a small portion. And with enough pulleys, you can almost lift anything if you do it right.
right, exactly. And I have my own theories with what do you call it, the Great Pyramid. And again, they might have done it a lot of different ways, but they're, you know, now in that case, you had the manpower. Like if you wanted to put a pulley on the top of a pyramid and then have a giant block at the bottom, you had tons of literal counterweight in people. You could have people come up, stand on the platform until it just slowly raised the block where you needed it. But again, that doesn't solve or fix the problem of how did they get the blocks from where they got them from, which were like 40 some miles away.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense unless it was like a Henry Houdini type thing where he moved the stuff in a way where people never saw his equipment. That's
Right.
possible. Something we have to take into consideration. I'm not saying that's what happened, because that's the thing. After a certain period of time, all you are left with is what people say. Like when people always say that to you, like it's not possible that these things we're talking about could exist because there'd be some remnant of UFOs if they were existed in India and whatnot. Well, let's think about that hypothetically. If there was, say, 2 to 5,000 years ago, some ancient civilization that possessed this technology. Obviously, it doesn't exist today, so it must have collapsed at some point. And when it did, the whole society as a whole collapsed, and everything around it probably collapsed. They lost food production, everything for whatever reason, natural disaster, war, who knows, all hypothetical. But when societies break down, especially in olden days, they destroy everything. I mean, it wouldn't have been a matter of time. I mean, and if you lose a significant portion of the population, yeah, you all know how to fly. We all know how to drive cars, right? Say we lost 70% of the population. No more manufacturing, no more shipping, no receiving. Eventually, I mean, people know how to drive a car, and they know how to fix a car. But do they know how to manufacture a car from scratch in the processing plant? You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot that goes into any complicated machine that if a society crumbles, you're no longer able to make these things. So it wouldn't be too long, I'm assuming, before they would be melting down these things to make simple implements like spears and swords to go kill each other.
Yeah, exactly. And I have no doubt that these guys were able, you know, again, I think the type of technology, as you put it, you know, that they had was probably very earth centric. Uh, like I'm sure that there's energy in the earth that we're not able to tap somehow. And I think whatever things that they used to bring them out, they were things. They weren't necessarily machines as, or they weren't machines as we need them. They're not carbon based. They're not using the combustion engine. And people have to understand everything that we live, all the air and everything we breathe, is based essentially on carbon. Carbon, its reaction with helium and oxygen. And I think, previous generations, thousands of years ago had things or machines or, stone blocks that were able to tap into an energy that we just didn't use basically for the most part and just got forgotten. I mean, we have dozens of, unknown civilizations where we come across it, but we have no Rosetta Stone to break it down basically. So there's a language there, but we don't have a Rosetta Stone to figure it out.
And it's the same thing with the Mayan culture. And in that same respect, when we come across a lot of these ancient cultures, we find that we have actually been lost to a significant portion of knowledge. Like for the Mayans example, by the time it took them to actually be able to decode that particular language as best they could, because actually during the Spanish conquest of South America, the Catholic religion actually had destroyed a lot of that stuff, saying it represented Satanism. So that's almost why that language was lost forever, because of the Catholic Church, long story short. But anyway, we found out they had a calendar that actually, the way they chronicalized days and months and yada yada, this and that is actually more advanced than any calendar used by anyone currently. So, I mean, it's a fact.
Right, again, the Mayan calendar, and I think the Hindu calendar as well, the Indian calendar there, both are more exact than what we have at the moment.
Yeah. And I also wonder, too, because when I think about India and ancient civilizations, there's also, in southern, I believe it's west coast, southern Africa, there are some temples of these ancient culture that goes back to around Egyptian times, where they have their square towers built inverted into the ground where it's hollowed out around them. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? And they are also Christians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, when you look at a lot of that stuff, like there might have been a diffusion from one place to the other. But again, the big question is, and again, it goes back to that Eurocentric idea, like where's the diffusion coming from? Like kind of like who had it first. And they, almost always, like I said, we're very Middle Eastern, Mesopotamia centric, I could call it. And I think, again, they want to say, okay, Sumeria, Babylon, kind of the first civilization, but that's not really true. You have at least two, and actually three other civilizations that were growing on simultaneously. They just found a new one in South America somewhere, just only a handful of months ago. That it's a civilization, to equal of or as old as Sumeria when that was developing into Babylon and such.
And it's the same
but
thing
you
with
also
finding,
have India and China developing around the same time, out of the prehistoric period.
It's also the same thing. They find new species every year too. And like the FBI says, every year there's 100 to 200 new serial killers at large. So as the species go extinct too, you know what I mean? Every year they're finding new species. Every year they're finding new species that are extinct now that don't exist. And in a way, even though a lot of this is due to pollution and overgrowth of our civilizations and populations and not appropriately taking care of our environments, a lot of times we find that certain animals thrive and overcome and evolve just like we do. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And it was very interesting stuff. And the way I see things, I think a lot of it probably did come from India to a large degree and diffused away from there. If you look at where people evolved, It's predominantly Kenya and Ethiopia. Those are the oldest pieces of bone that we find, that comes from humanity as we know it. But what's interesting is that if you look at Kenya and Ethiopia, it's on the east coast of Africa, right next to, the Indian Ocean. And this is, again, it's all ties in, like, you have stories of Mu and Atlantis and everything. I have no doubt that there's probably older bones further out in the Indian Ocean, like groups, that are even older, thousands of years. So we have stuff like that. We have no idea. There could have been, a different landmass that was raised and got lowered that people came from, that are even older, or maybe, who knows, there could have been 5 different versions of people on an island out there. The island sank and then they spread out, and you had from there Chinese, India, European, and African. But who knows? I mean, that's one of those things you'll have to wait and ask God when you die. I don't know.
I understand.
but
Yeah.
but
And
it does
one
make
thing I
sense. Like,
wanted,
you look at the Pangea and the idea of you could literally take the continents and stick them together like a giant puzzle, and they would fit perfectly. And that's without taking into account, like, raised and lowered land masses that have happened over thousands of years.
that's the $1 million question. When they were together, were we kicking around like we are now? It
Right.
really
And if
is.
we were, what were we? Who were we?
Well, they
Again,
found big carvings, sculptures of human faces in the sides of mountains in Africa, and they don't look like Africans. They almost look
right.
like Indians or, Caucasians, and it's interesting. You know what I mean? Just like the ancient Egyptians, the rulers at least, the depictions of them, they look like, somewhat at least Indians or Caucasians. They don't look like African Americans. And I've heard some scientists talk about that there's hominids on most continents. You know what I mean? Which is weird too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very interesting, like, and I'm sure you've read or heard of it too, like, South America, they had stories of, bearded white people that came there, thousands of years, and that's what led to the Aztec and Mayan empires to Aztec and Incan empires to eventually get destroyed, because they had this myth, this story of a returning bearded, red-haired god.
I've heard that
And
before too. And they
yeah,
also said at times when they've needed people, a bearded Caucasian fellow would come and help them, you know what I mean, and show them how to build boats and do different things.
yeah, and not only did it say that he was bearded, that he would have red hair and everything, like, they picked the year and they had, like, the date or something. I think it might even been the literal day that they were going to come, and that's when they did arrive. So the
Sounds like a
Spaniards.
Viking, red hair
Uh,
with a beard.
But again, like, I think I don't have any doubt that you had the fusion from the east to our west from China. And I don't think there's any, like, there are pyramids, like you were saying, in China and other places. They have a flat roof. They're not pointy like the Egyptian ones. And that's what you see again over in South America and Central America. So I don't have any doubt that there was definitely diffusion there, but there was also a group in South America called the Olmec, and the Olmec, uh, they might have had a written language. I don't remember, but whatever they had, nobody was able to decipher it anyhow. But the interesting thing with them is they have these giant heads, like carved heads of somebody that are huge. They're like 8, 10, 15 feet tall, weigh
Almost like the Easter
thousands of
Island
tons.
heads.
And they look like Africans. Like, I don't have any doubt that there was diffusion from Africa somehow and came over here.
Interesting, almost like the Eastern Island heads. You know what I mean? And it's hard to depict what they look like from if they're trying to characterize what they look like. Because if they did, they were some interesting looking folks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and again, the Polynesians out there, they were a seafaring bunch. Like they used to routinely go miles in every direction. So
Yes.
yeah, I have no doubt that they were, going up, out, and beyond. I'm sure they made it to South America. You might have even had Chinese that came to Polynesia and then made it to South America as well. And people have to keep in mind there's also the jet streams in the air, and there's also, I'm not sure if they're jet streams that are in the water too, or what you call them, but they run, basically from the coast of China and Japan to California and Peru. Like there's two different ones, and the same deal. We have not so much a stream that runs from like Norway to America, but we have one that goes basically from New York, I think, to the tip of Africa, the top part of Africa, maybe. So I don't,
Interesting.
basically where the Straits of Hercules was, the Straits of Gibraltar is today. So I don't have any doubt again that you had currents and jet streams and everything else that, it could be done. Like if they wanted to, and if they were blown off course and you survived, there's no doubt you could make it to America or, Easter Island or, Africa and back.
Very interesting. Another thing that was very interesting for me too was the fact that like I never realized this until just recently, but you know how there was a thriving Native American cultures here that were destroyed by the Europeans. Also, Europeans in Russia destroyed a thriving uh, native race there that was already there in Russia, and they were all over in the islands there in between America, over by Alaska and North America, or the North Pole. And they were really interesting seafaring people too, and they went all over the place. And they almost looked like the same type of people from Easter Island, the Polynesians.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. I mean, it's really hard to tell. Like when I was even a little kid, and they were like, "Well, the first people in America walked across the land bridge," and there's a whole theory with that. That it's like almost again like land bridge centric idea. And to me, as a kid, unless the weather was really different, I find it hard to believe that people would want to go that way. Number one, for the most part. I mean, as you got more northern, it would get colder and colder. And I would think there'd be less to eat. Again, like I don't know what the weather was like back then, but it just seems like I'm sure there might have been again like a few people that made it that trip, but it just seems much more likely to me that somebody or other got blown off course and hit a current or a jet stream or a boat and the right time and of the year and the day, and they were able to make it to America. And there was probably male and female groups, and they procreated, and that's how you have your Indians and stuff today.
There's some ancient race.
Yeah, it
Maybe.
just seems much more probable, I would say, that a boat or a couple of boats got blown off course and ended up, on the coast of California or the coast of Peru or what have you.
Yes.
Much more so than that somebody walked across the frozen land bridge. Because I mean, in theory, it sounds probable, but when you look at that break between Russia, Siberia, and our Alaska, yeah, that's a lot of room. Like if it's all ice, like I mean, what were they eating? You have to wonder.
Yeah, for
I
real.
don't, I just don't see it really happening like that. But that's my own personal theory. That's my own personal feeling.
I think it's a very good one, and definitely this our whole topic of conversation this evening is I found very personally interesting myself because I've never really heard anyone discussing the topics in the way that we are definitely tonight. One thing I wanted to tell you, I just acquired. I'm sure you're going to get a kick out of this. I know you have a personal interest in antiques and whatnot. Is I have a London brass, British issued India naval compass from World War I.
How about that? Well, that's worth some money, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
Very interesting.
supposedly $200 in mint condition. I've I've flashed some photos of it, and I'm currently flashing some now. So it's actually pretty neat. In pristine condition, there's even a level there actually has a little bubble in it still too. So it's actually pretty nice. Yeah, buddy.
Very cool.
Would you mind? Would you hate it to answer some questions from a YouTube subscriber?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Would love to hear it.
I'm gonna go ahead and introduce him, and he's pretty new to YouTube. He has his own YouTube channel. His name is Luke. I'll let him introduce himself and tell you guys the name of his YouTube channel here.
Absolutely.
My name's Luke Vest. I have a YouTube channel. I'm fairly new, so I don't have much on there yet, but I'm working on it. I'm posting some new videos and doing some recordings and some interesting research lately.
Name of your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel, you can find it by searching for jvest haha at yahoo.com. I don't really have a name for it besides my name currently, so you can check that out though. I got a couple of videos, a funny thing that I posted, and a lot of people liked and wanted me to put it on there so they could watch it. And I'm more into some of the like top weird stuff that you can find around the world and that sort of thing. So
you had an interesting video that I watched. It was the top 10 what places?
It was a group of 11 weird, creepy places from around the world.
Very interesting. I like that video. You guys should check that out and check out Luke's YouTube channel. All right, so you know our topic here tonight. Did you have any questions for Ray?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the ancient religions from India. I happen to be a little bit interested in that, and like the monks and stuff from India. I found them interesting.
Yeah, in India, their main religion is Hindu religion, and they have a host of like gods and goddesses and stuff. And again, like they have a whole cosmology of them, and it's also entwined with their early rulers and everything. And you'll see that with them, and I think China too also has a similar where they have like a first ruler, and the ruler, I think it's less semi mythical type. There's no real, concrete evidence for their existence, but there's also nothing that says that there isn't. But you could definitely end up being, more of an expert on that stuff, on the religious books and everything, just that alone.
Yeah, there's I don't know how many, isn't there like a couple hundred different gods that they worship in India? Not that everyone worships all of them, but they have a whole plethora of different individuals to worship, correct or no?
No, actually, it's way more than that. I believe it's something like 14 million gods and goddesses, and they're I think it's called polymorphic religion, where they have, more than one god, and we're monotheistic. Most, Christian religion, we believe in one God, Yahweh, Jehovah. And theirs is, there's a couple. There's like Krishna, there's Kali, and there's a bunch of, stories, where one God will basically kill the other, and there's parts of their body or their head will spring up multiple times. That's like Kali, and Kali, I think, means like Black Death or the Black One or something in Hindu. And, all their stuff, their religious books, you really truly could be an expert on just that alone. And go on forever teaching classes just on that, because you'll get tied into it. What I believe they call their texts are called Vedas, I think. And you could just be an expert on the Vedas, and you would you would make money, but that would be a lifelong pursuit, just that there.
Nice. Luke, did you have any more questions? That's a very excellent answer, Ray, and I'm glad you asked that question, Luke, so we could fill in the blanks on some other answered questions for people out there watching.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
glad you gave me that opportunity because I didn't know much about the Indian gods and that sort of thing, but it sounds like they may have been the basis for the religion and gods and goddesses and like the Egyptians and Greeks and Romans religions as well.
That's a point that previous filmmakers like Peter Joseph and various different other individuals have made in the past too. That Mithra and some of these other guys, it's possible that they could be the basis for different other religious figures. Even some people have said even Jesus.
well, there is a very small but strong connection between some of the Nordic gods and what do you call it? The Hindu gods from India. They have a character that's very similar to Thor. That's more like a sky god, and there's been parallels drawn between the two, which is also probably one of the other big reasons why Hitler sent some of his scientists to go and prove that point because they really, the Germans really wanted to shy away from any idea that they had anything to do with the Middle East and or Africa or anything like that. They really wanted to propagate the idea that they were from a master race that were further north, but they got their linguistics from, the Indus Valley and, it was an Indo-European thing. I guess for them, it was the lesser of the two evils in their mind, maybe. But in truth, it probably isn't far off. I would say, like I was saying earlier, I think, the majority of our written words and everything and our math and algebra, it all pretty much probably came from the Indus Valley. I really don't see it, it may have, but I really don't see the two historically operating separately where you had, algebra that was Arabic and algebra that was Indian. I'm sure, one probably influenced the other. And I'm leaning towards India. That's my feeling.
Man, yeah, there's so much interesting things we can talk about. Like I think when we were talking about the
Those
text
are great
earlier,
questions. They really are. Those are some great questions you asked.
yeah, they were, buddy. They really were. Yeah, another thing is not. I think it's Indian culture or uh, some ancient Middle Eastern culture that comes out of the cradle, the birthplace, the cradle of human civilization. Is that they haven't even deciphered all the ancient texts all the way because, like you said, there's a million gods. They have almost that many different ancient texts, like the ones that Nazi scientists said that they actually got the information that led them to create the first jet propulsion engine.
Right, exactly. And I have no doubt that, there's tons of text and again, maybe they're not being read literally enough. And they used to write, most of their stuff is symbolic for the most part. But if you look, a little deeper, you see a word like mercury and you're dealing with something. All right, this is
Complex.
an actual physical substance. Like, what are they talking about here?
Yeah, if you're using
They,
mercury to create anything, some kind of combustion, that's definitely complex process and engine there.
right, exactly. And those Vedas, there's thousands of them, and they deal on a variety of subjects, and they'll usually deal with battles between, different kingdoms and everything. Because that's the other thing with India too. Is like people think of India, as one giant nation like we have today, but in actuality, there was, I think, maybe four or five, possibly six different ruling areas of India because India is very huge at any given point. You had different, kingdoms within there. And today, even like when you go to India, their dialect, the majority is Hindi, but there's also many different dialects. You actually have, I think maybe 16 different dialects all across India.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, even though say everyone there can speak Hindi as the main point, you're going to speak, slightly different versions, Probably a little more deeper, but a similar idea would be like if you're in America, yeah, you speak English, but when you go down south, there's such heavy slang. But I think even this is more in depth, like that's slang, but this is like a different dialect. It's an offshoot somehow, of
Right.
Hindi.
Yeah, it's just like reminds me of China. Kind of actually, we keep bouncing back and forth. There's so many different dialects there too, as well.
Exactly, exactly. And too, like you look at India, China, you probably had some diffusion there as well. Although in that area, I think historically speaking, their prehistory probably did evolve separately. And the reason I say that is because the Huns, which is where Attila came from, which is the northern Siberia area, was a completely different dynasty than the Han dynasty, which is further south. And basically, the Hans were pretty much, and even to this day, the majority of the upper class uh, of China comes from the Han dynasties, from the Han group. And the Huns basically would come in periodically over the hundreds of thousands of years and wipe out portions of their kingdom. And then they would go back, they would appease them somehow. And then the Han would grow even stronger again and so on. But again, I think there was another dynasty, another group that was further south, and I forget their name. But very interesting. Again, like, people think of China as everyone's Chinese, but that's not really true. There's at least 3 or 4 different groups within China, all war with each other.
Oh, for sure. And then when you talk about the wars that they had with Korea and stuff, we're talking about things now that are probably just totally beyond the average Joe's, information base. But that's okay. You know what I mean? Interesting things for people to Google when they get bored. Um,
I get lost in Wikipedia, honestly. Like I'll be on Wikipedia and I will end up following one link to another link to another. I just can't stop. I have to literally like turn the computer off in order to go to bed some nights.
I I totally agree with that and sympathize. I'll find myself falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night too, just random information I'm reading or video I'm trying to absorb, and just from various different types of information. Well, buddy, as
Yeah.
we're getting to probably the end of our show now, and I'm just wondering if there's anything else you want to talk about. Is there any websites you have that you would like to push here? Now is that time to do these things.
Well, not at the moment. Eventually, I'm going to put together some books on my ideas on prehistory and the interest of India and its diffusion of ideas. And there's also a couple other books on other subjects I'm sure we could tackle in future interviews. But I'm looking at the giants of America, the red-haired giants, the Seekikas, they call them. I think that's a fantastic story. That's a whole other thing.
Interesting. Okay.
The missing 411 actually is very interesting to me. I've been finding that also ties in a tiny bit with India. I don't know, you and I spoke about it before, but there is an Indian creature called the Tengu, Engu. It's more known in Japan, but it started in India as an idea, and it's like this, semi-divine creature that has the ability to control weather, that takes shoes and clothing off of people, will pick them up and strand them places. It's kind of like, almost like a high-end trickster, basically,
Wow.
but also has like very malevolent feelings with human beings. And it's the only thing, like when I read the 411 book and hear the interviews, that ties in, exactly with something historical or something, from mythology. It's the only piece of mythology that fits 3 or 4 of the points from missing 411 stories. And so my theory, my hypothesis is that this creature or spirit, whatever it may be, if it exists, it got its start in India. And then again, they also exist in Chinese literature. And then from China, the Japanese have the same creature. So you're kind of seeing again the diffusion and the movement from India to China to Japan. And now you have these cases here in America, like on the West Coast, uh, along California and British Columbia, Vancouver Island, Washington State, that whole area. So, it's very possible that whatever this thing is, or, if it exists, and maybe it flew over here, maybe it came across the land bridge and took a boat, who knows, like we were talking earlier. But it is the only thing that I've read about that fits the bill for the most part. So
It's
I
really
would love to hear
interesting too
what you
because
and some of the
David,
YouTubers think on that too.
it's really interesting too, Ray. I mean, I made a video about it, and my YouTube subscribers have you to thank for bringing that information towards me too. After researching every aspect of it, I mean, sometimes it plays with people and tricks them. It's described as murdering people when they stumble across their lairs in the forest, which kind of fits in with a lot of mysterious different things that happen to people that have been found and have not been found that have disappeared under mysterious circumstances here in America. And it does make you wonder, you know what I mean? And when you think about things like Mothman and some of these other things that people subscribe as being real and whatnot, it makes you wonder if there's something out there. Maybe there's just a little bit more of a complicated creature than even us. I mean, we like to think of ourselves at the top of the food chain. Who knows? Maybe there's something out there that possesses some type of skill to where it can hide from us.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, like when I read, Dave Paulides' books, The Missing 411, and hear his, interviews, I think he's grabbed a lot of different things. And the sense I get from all of those cases is the majority, 80% of the ones, particularly on the East Coast, the West Coast, mind you, where the mountains are, I think that's Tengu related. I think whatever that creature or spirit is and what it does, I think it's, that's all related to people that are found without shoes and everything. That's pretty much it. Now, when you get to the West Coast, when you get away from the West Coast, to the East Coast and where the Appalachian Trail is, that could be also Tengu related, but some of the stories like the one girl in Michigan is talking about, her hat got taken off her head by a big dog, Mr. Wolf or something she calls it.
Yes.
That could be Dogman related. I think there was maybe a couple other ones down like in Arkansas and Appalachia area that I think kind of sounds more like fairy-like people went in. It's the Fae folk were known to take people too. So I think Dave hit on a lot of different things. But I think you have maybe 5 different culprits, but the majority, 80% are Tengu related. And, I'll tell you how I found that is I went to Google and I typed in, missing, mysterious, lost their shoes or something. I forget what the keywords were, but it brought up the name of the Tengu. And like in the little caption of Google it says, Tengu takes their shoes. So I went and I looked it up, and sure enough, like this creature, spirit, whatever, it seems to hit the, 3 of the 4 points. So, and there's a show on right now. It's been on for, I think, 10, 11 years now called Supernatural. And that's kind of where I got the idea to start researching keywords on things like that. The 2 brothers in the show, Sam and Dean, will, to get an idea of what they're dealing with beforehand, before they attack it, they'll, do some research when they come to the town and find out like history and what it is they're dealing with. And that's kind of what Sam does. He'll go on and type in keywords and then see what comes up. And, I did the same thing. And that's so far that particular story. And I believe there might even be a heavy dose of truth to it, because if you type in Tengu, they're in like tons of literature that's, Indian literature, tons of Chinese literature, Japanese. So I'm looking at that and I'm seeing a diffusion from the west to the east that way. I'm like, I have no doubt that this thing, whatever it was, could have made its way to America somehow, some way.
And when you look at some of the South American cultures, they do describe some things that are almost like a Birdman. and that's what sometimes this is described to look at.
Oh yeah, I was going to say there was an interesting story on another podcast, and I hate to mention rivals or maybe any competition, but it was the Expanded Perspectives guys, and they had one about this family. It was a story, an urban legend from Kentucky, I think,
Okay.
and the family, yeah, had moved into the area, and nobody had heard of them. They never really came to town except for like I forget what it was like bird food or eggs or something. And the way the story went is that they eventually the place their cabin burnt down, and the people kind of gave the impression like they were bird people or something, like they looked human but they weren't.
Dave is
Something.
sometimes talking
Sure.
about people ask him about Thunderbirds, and that is a conspiratorial, a type of cryptid type of creature that people suggest could exist, and maybe that and this are one and the same. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, actually, I believe that too. The Thunderbirds. Again, I think you got two possibilities, and I think that both are true. Like, I think in some places, and you got to remember when you go to, like, East Texas and North Texas and stuff, you can go for miles and miles, days and days, and not see a single soul.
It's very true.
Yeah, and that's just on the roads. So
I've been in Texas before.
I think it's something like 80% or 85% of America doesn't have people in it, basically, like it's rural. And if you think about it, you look at a place like Texas and some place too, like Ohio, where, you have Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Youngstown. But then in between all of them, a lot of empty space, so there's plenty of room really to go running around. And I think you have two types of phenomenon with the Thunderbirds. I think there really are, or were, or could still be pterodactyl types that are still around. But then the other side is I think that there's, and I think this is true for probably 90% or more of all the esoteric stuff we encounter here on Earth. There is most definitely portals or doors that open or can be opened, and these things will pop in or out of, or they're able to manipulate them themselves.
I just read a story the other day of a gentleman in the 1950s, and I believe this was from Michigan. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But his wife came outside with something to drink for him. He was on his tractor, not a lawnmower, a tractor, 1950s. And another gentleman was coming down the road on his tractor to come help him finish up work in a field. And they described it as he drove into a mirror, and he just straight up disappeared and vanished, and was never seen or heard from again, him or his tractor. You've heard of this one as well?
Yes, I have. That's an old story. Came from a guy named Ambrose Pierce who wrote the story, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. And I believe he wrote an earlier short story that was something like the mysterious disappearance of Alfred Cole or something. But basically, yeah, he had that set, I think, in Kentucky or Tennessee or somewhere. But basically the story goes like he was walking across the field, he waved to him, and he disappeared. And there was like a round circle where he disappeared, and then within a year, like they would hear his voice and it would grow fainter over time, even though they'd see him.
Oh wow, I've heard that story too. I think these
Okay,
may
so
be
yours
two
is different
different
than that,
things.
or?
Yeah, because he was on a tractor, and another guy was coming on a tractor too down the road, and his wife was on the porch.
Mm-hmm.
And they said
Well,
he disappeared into a mirror. This may be the same story. I do apologize if it is. At some point in time, we can all make mistakes here, and so I'm honest when I do. I may be making one currently.
Sure. Yeah. Well, a lot of times what happens with the stories and like kind of like urban legends is the story itself is true, but the setting gets changed by time or just people, retelling them or what have you. And people, when they retell stories, they have a tendency to retell them, in their own area or what have you. I'll give you an example, like that story about the mafia guy that died and he was murdered and he's underneath the bed and then the couple find him. Usually that story is told as if it happened in Las Vegas, which it didn't. But it did happen in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I know that for a fact because I remember the newspaper you saw it happening in the 80s.
Huh.
So again, like that's because the two have gambling in common. People tend to think, the story got told well. It was, I think it was Las Vegas somewhere, but no, it didn't happen there. But it did happen in Atlantic City, though.
One thing I'm
So
sure
very
we can
interesting.
all agree on, and that is don't believe anything you can't prove with your own research, and do your research from multiple avenues, not just one place.
Right. Exactly. The possibility of all this stuff. Yeah, I have no doubt. And I don't have any doubt. I think 90% of the esoteric stuff we have in this world probably came through some kind of portal or wormhole that opened up where they, I'm sure like the UFOs have some ability to open up the portal at will. They have technological means to do that. But I do think that there are supernatural, dimensions and things that run parallel to ours. And every once in a while, maybe a male and female version of something pops out they can't get back, but they are able to procreate, and now you have dolphin here or something.
Yeah, they're trying to break that barrier right now. Scientists with technology and equipment that they have called CERN. I don't know if you're familiar with CERN at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Switzerland, I think, that has the underground one. Yeah, I don't have any doubt that they're trying to break stuff. I actually think that they probably can, but again, like I don't know what the results would be. I kind of get the sense like if we were able to, I don't think it would be a good thing, basically, and I'm sure they're aware of that too.
Yeah, I understand. And you described that right about them trying to break stuff. One thing it seems like they're always trying to break is the back of the average Joe. The people that run
That
this
is true.
country and this world we live in. Boy,
That is true.
Ray, I really do appreciate you coming on the show this evening and the time you took out of your evening to spend with us all here. And I'm sure all of
Oh,
our listening audience would agree with that too. I want to take the time to let you wrap it up and sign us out here. If there's anything else you want to add in here, bud.
no, that was it, guy. I would love to come back on and talk about the missing 411, the Giants, and Dogmen. Those are my three favorite subjects, and I'm pretty well read and well schooled on all of them. So
Well,
I'd love to hear from other YouTubers as well.
you're more than welcome to come on anytime you'd like, buddy. I'd love to have you back on, and I'm sure other people would too.
Excellent.
You have interesting information that not a lot of people do.
Well, I'm fairly well read, and I do talk to people, and I have sources, and I have a gut instinct for what feels right and feels real. And if if it doesn't feel right or real, I probably won't say. I'll say, well, it's possible, but but I kind of get a sense for things, and yeah, I appreciate that, Fritz. Anytime.
You're a down to earth guy, and I enjoy talking with you as always.
Thank you, Fritz. Good to do it again.
Well, I'm glad you could both join me this evening, and I hope you guys have a nice night. And you viewers out there in the YouTube audience, don't forget to subscribe to both of my YouTube shows, Fritz KO Vids and Factual Conspiracy. Check out Luke's new show. What's the name of it, Luke?
It's Loot Vest on YouTube.
Very nice. And go ahead and check out Ray Dennis Davis's future website, and I will advertise that in a later date when that is available for you guys when Ray comes on his show in the future. And so I'd want to thank you all for watching and hit the like button and subscribe and have a nice evening, folks.